Why does the offensive line set up to be the boogeyman again for this team? I'll tell you why in just a second on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard what she said. It's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch them or you listen to them, you go to that location, YouTube, wherever it is, and make sure you tap in each and every day so you do not miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Glad to have you here. If you're an everydayer, glad to have you back. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right down to it because the season is not that far away from starting. By the time we end up, I'm going to tell you who I think could be a special group, no pun intended. You can already figure out who I'm talking about. The most likely surprise to be good and the most likely surprise to be not so good. I'll give you all the backdrop as to why this is important. But first, we're going to start off with the most likely team or part of the team unit that will be the Achilles heel of this football team. And without further ado, I'm going to explain to you that it's the same damn one that was the Achilles heel of this team last year, and it is the offensive line. I got to go through some history here. If you're not familiar with the podcast, I don't assume, as much as I like to assume that everyone here for the first time has always been a listener, I have to go back and tell you some things. Going into last season, most people thought the boogeyman of this team, and I'm going to use that term a lot because that's exactly what it turned out to be. They thought it would be the offensive line. Oh, I'm sorry, the edge, the defensive line. Me, this podcast host, has said for years, at least 3 years, that they ain't going to fix the team till they fix the offensive line. And that they were doing, this started when they got Trevor Lawrence. I said, I'm not one of those people that believes that you have to have the infrastructure ready to go before you go out and get a generational type player. No, I'm not like that because I know your needs aren't met in order of importance. It just doesn't happen that way. The needs are never available in the order that you think. You get a chance to get Trevor Lawrence, you draft Trevor Lawrence. But then I said this, they need to fortify the front of that line. And I'm not just talking about hoping to develop guys. I'm not talking about just being adequate. I'm talking about being great. Because if you're great, it makes everything else go easy. You got a great offensive line and a great quarterback, you can score a whole bunch of points, even if your defense can't stop anybody, but you got a chance because you can score a whole bunch of points. Well, neither happened. They ain't been scoring a whole bunch of points, and the offensive line hasn't been good. Trevor's been running for his life, and now a whole bunch of people around the country don't think that he's living up to his potential, okay? So starting right at that point, this is our thought process. Last year, going into the season, I said the offensive line was the biggest problem. Most people thought it was edge rusher. It turned out to be offensive line, so I was right. But I also said something else, that I think the first thing that they're going to get if they have an opportunity in 2024 is going to be a number one wide receiver. They also did that. So there's not necessarily a direct correlation to what's the worst part of your team, but then what is the thing that you're going to get first? I think we've established that with some podcasts that we did last week or even during the draft. They end up going out and getting a number one wide receiver. I think if you look at last year's team at the start of the season before the boogeyman bit them, everybody would have said the eventually. John Shipley said it and I said it in 2024. This is before they played one game in 2023. John Shipley from SI, shout out to him. Before they played one game in 2023, I posed the question, what's the one thing the Jaguars are going to need next year? I said a number one wide receiver. It's what they did. You asked me what was going to be the worst part of the team. I said the offensive line. And I asked everyone to be patient about the edge rush. Turns out the edge duo of Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen were the leading sack duo in the NFL. All right, now that I'm finished tooting my own horn, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not so sure about what I'm about to tell you, but I think this is what's going to happen. While everybody's thinking about how good the team is going to be and all of their optimism about this season, I do not disagree with that. Every team can improve. We're going to talk about what we think this team needs to do to improve. At this point, now remember, last year, I said the big bugaboo was the offensive line, but I did not think that that was the thing that they were going to be able to address first. And here's the reason. When you get one wide receiver, that's one player. To fix an offensive line, it takes multiple players. So that's why I said what I said. This is a little more difficult to fix because it requires a bunch of pieces as opposed to getting one guy. So now, what do I think about this season before they ever play a game? I'm glad you hung out with me long enough for me to explain that to you so you'll understand exactly what I'm about to say. I think the offensive line is going to be the Achilles heel of the team. And I think offensive line is going to be the first thing that they need to go and get next year. You got it? There you go. So now I am actually saying that both of those things are the same. I hope y'all follow me. Both of them, in my opinion, are the same. I just believe it's going to be painfully obvious that that is still going to be the weakest part of the team. It doesn't mean they're going to be weak to the point because the Jaguars think they're fine. And I believe them when they say the offensive line has played well. So if that's the case, then okay, let's see what it is. I still think at some point they're going to have to go out and address offensive line. And I think it's going to also be considered the weakest part of the team. Now, Kansas City won the Super Bowl. They had a weakest part of their team. They still won, but they had parts of their team that they wanted to be better. And they went out and got them better in the offseason, apparently, right? They needed wide receiver to be better, even though wide receiver was good enough for them to actually win the Super Bowl. You follow? So when it comes to the Jaguars, I think they can have some success. I think they're going to win the division and become a playoff team. I think the offensive line, they're going to get by, and they might scrape and scratch their way all the way to the AFC Championship game. And then when it gets to that point, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That's when the football gods take over. Health comes into play. Where they play the game comes into play. All of those things, a scheme, who they're playing against, what the matchups are. So this is not a Debbie Downer opinion. This is not an opinion that is saying, well, the offensive line is going to cost them the Super Bowl. No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but they ain't played one game yet. I also believe it's going to be the thing that they address next year in abundance. Here's why. Cam Newton. I said Cam Newton. Cam Robinson, free agent. Walker Little, contract up. Brandon Sheriff, well, he'll be old, right? Mitch Morse will be 32. I think out of necessity, they're going to gang up and go get a whole bunch of offensive linemen, whether that be in free agency or whether that be in the draft. I'd say next year they might add three bodies. Not all priority picks. I'm not saying first round. I'm not saying give some dude $100 million in free agency. What I am saying is I believe that's the part of their team they're going to fortify next year. Now, just like the offensive line, in particular, the center position, just like that shocked y'all and ended up being the thing that they needed the most. And just like it was a shock to y'all that the defensive line and the edge rushers and the pass rushers actually went out and played really well last year. In segment 2, I'm going to talk about the most likely surprises, good and bad. It might shock you who I say, but I'm going to tell you anyway, and I'm going to do it in the second segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's sponsor is 5 Hour Energy. Now, listen, I know you know the brand, man, because the brand has been out there and you absolutely know what it is. But it's the hard-working people like you have trusted 5 Hour Energy for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots. Right at the cash register at nearly every convenience store, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. Now, I just joined the gym, so guess what? It's going to be time for me to get that in when I get my workout on because I want to maximize my workout and I want to do it with as much energy as possible. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONFB, like for football, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Remember that. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day, talking about surprises. We already established that the most likely Achilles heel of this football team is going to be the offensive line. That does not mean that they will actually be an Achilles heel. It's just, to me, that's the weakest link of this team. And if the Jaguars are going to be derailed a little bit, or if the Jaguars are not going to be as successful as we all hope and think they have a shot to be if things go correctly, then I believe the culprit for that will be the offensive line. I also think the offensive line is going to be the thing that they need to go out and get an abundance of next year, only because, well, you always want to strengthen the weakest part of your team. But the other thing is, a lot of those dudes that's going to be playing, they're going to be either old or they're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to pay them to keep them. And I don't think they're good enough for the Jaguars to do that. But what about the surprises? We all get surprises. Like I just mentioned, we all did. Last year, I got lucky when I got it right. I ain't going to lie to you. I got lucky in an unfortunate way because it played out exactly the way I hoped it wouldn't, right? But I was trying to use the best I could to come up with, what do they call it, deductive reasoning, to come up with reasons why I think things could happen. And those things actually did. And I hated the fact that I was right about that. So let's just say these are things that I hope. One of these things is something I hope I'm right about. The other is something I hope I'm wrong about. What is the potential unit that could shock the world with how good they are? At this point, if you listen to Locked On Jaguars every day, this will not be a shocker to you. No pun intended. It won't, because I have raved and raved and raved about the way they have gone out and built this particular unit, and that is the defensive line. And I'm not just talking about the edge, because last year, if you name the second biggest problem the Jaguars had, it was the interior defensive line and their ability to stop the run. That was a problem. The year before, the secondary problem was linebackers guarding receivers and running backs that ran across their face. We kept pointing that out over and over again, and now they're better at that, right? And I think the scheme is going to be better for them to be better at that. I believe this defensive line is going to be very, very good. And the reason why is because, one, Ryan Nielsen and the scheme change. I think that is huge. I think it's a big deal. Putting guys in the right place, understanding adjustments, having enough depth that if somebody isn't getting it done, then you switch and you make somebody else do it. The thing is it's not going to be reacting to what the opponent is going to do. It is going to be in your face, dictating policy on that football field. If they can't do it on offense, then at least they have to do it on defense. And what am I talking about? I am talking about taking possession of something that you believe is yours, and that is the offensive line. Go get me my line of scrimmage. Can you say that to the offensive line? I don't think so. Can you say that to the defensive line? You damn right you can, because of the big physical nature of the team. Now, I know you got some young guys. You got Jordan Jefferson and, of course, Mason Smith. But they're the reasons why I say you can get away with this, because you have a nice mix of veterans with Roy Robinson Harris, with my man Ledbetter, who made the team again, Jeremiah Ledbetter. I told everyone he was going to make that team. And then is CZ Otomawayo. Now, I hope I said his name correctly, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it when I get a real roster that's going to break it down for me. But I believe the length, the athleticism, the depth to go along with Devon Hamilton, I think it's going to be lights out. And I ain't even mentioned Eric Armstead, who's listed as defensive end, but I think he's going to spend a lot of time at 3 technique. I believe this defensive line is going to cover up a lot of warts if they try to come into, if they try to manifest themselves. It's going to cover a lot of warts for this football team. The defensive line has a chance to be special. And I don't mean, now, I don't hear very many people thinking that the defensive line is going to be a weakness. I'm not talking about being a weakness. I'm not talking about being adequate. I'm not talking about being in the upper half of the league. I'm not even talking about being in the upper echelon of the league. I'm talking about being one of the 2 or 3 best in the National Football League. So I'm gonna give you a play here, and I'm gonna show you something that we're gonna carry over till Monday. As long as no big story breaks and they don't go out and make a big old trade, I'm gonna carry this over until Monday because we're gonna have all weekend to let this marinate and think about it. Once we get done at the end of segment 3, we're going to tie all this together, and it might give you an idea of and give you a baseline of what this team's identity could be if these things go this way. Like if the offensive line doesn't play well enough to give Trevor the time, if the defensive line makes up for it and snatches back the line of scrimmage on that side of the ball, and then something else we're going to discuss in segment 3. But that being said, I think most people agree with that. That defensive line is going to absolutely be wonderful. It is going to be the thing that can turn the game for the Jaguars, whether it be through sacks, whether it be through pressure, hurries, chasing the quarterback, knocking him off of his line, getting him off of his square, creating havoc so the defensive backs can step up and do their thing. And I am glad I got to that. That was an accidental segue because if there's a most likely surprise in a bad way, I think it's the defensive backfield. That does not mean they don't have great players. That does not mean, I don't mean they got them either, but it does not mean that I think they're not good. I think Tyson Campbell deserved his money. I like what I've seen so far from Darnell Savage. I keep telling people that I think Andre Sisco is one of those top 1/4 of safeties in the National Football League. He just has to stay healthy. I am not in the same department as a lot of my media friends that doesn't think Ronald Darby needs to be here. I like the Ronald Darby signing. I think that's exactly the type of player you need. You can't go out and get a whole bunch of all-stars. Ronald Darby is a solid professional player. And then I think they have nice depth behind them with a bunch of young guys, although unproven. But I believe that the defensive line can help the defensive backs by getting that pressure. But I also know that they are not completely elite all the way across the board. If there's a question about Darby, it has something to do with age. If there's a question about Savage, it's like he ain't really been a Savage in the slot because that's not where he has played primarily when he was in Green Bay. If there's a question about, well, when they're in a 4-2-5, who's the other safety? Oh, we got to wait to week 7 to get Tayshaun Gibson back, and then Dewey Wingard, while he's way better than people thought he ever was, is he really the dude that you want to sit here and say, well, Dewey Wingard's got it, don't worry about it? I don't know. I also believe the safety is something that they're going to address next year in the draft on day 1 or day 2. We're going to talk about the draft right now. We're starting to shake this up like, okay, worst case scenario and best case scenario at the same time. Offensive line isn't as good as the Jaguars think. I don't believe they are, but they're good enough to keep you around in games. How can this team still make a deep run in the playoffs? They have to have a good defensive line, a great defensive line, if there are questions about the secondary. And there are some questions from a lot of people. So let's just say there's wiggle room there where the secondary will either play great or bad. But if that's a question, then in order to eliminate that question or alleviate the concerns from that particular question, if the defensive line does what they're supposed to do, it ain't going to even matter, right? But there's another thing. There's a special group, a very special group. They're called special teams. I'll explain to you exactly how they could impact and they could cause this thing to shift one way or the other if they do certain things. I'm going to get to that in segment 3. First, I'm going to let you know, if you've already heard the NFL division preview for the AFC South, but to become the most informed NFL fan, make sure you check out the entire 2024 Locked On NFL season preview covering every division across the league from our 32 NFL hosts who cover the team each and every day, including yours truly. This 8-episode series will stream live on the 24/7 Locked On NFL YouTube channel and Amazon Fire TV app. Catch all the action on Tuesday, September 3rd, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. That's right. The 2024 Locked On NFL Draft Season Preview is the kind of analysis, insight, and entertainment you won't find anywhere else. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to talk about this special unit, which is the special teams. We're going to hit that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I got to let you know about our sponsor today, man. It is eBay Motors. They got all of the championship elements, passion, drive, and patience, right? The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. We're always thanking you for making us your first listen. We absolutely appreciate you doing that. We're talking about what could possibly derail the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've established that the offensive line, if there's going to be a culprit for it, that's who it's going to be, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't overcome, right? So they had the same, pretty much not the same offensive line, but I would say I was equally concerned in 2022. And they went to the divisional championship game and played the eventual Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs and were within one score, and they fumbled the ball close to in the red zone, and they ended up losing. It was a good game. The Jaguars lost, I think it was 27-17. They lost, but they were right there. So that means that you can overcome. The Jaguars made it into 2017. They overcame a bad quarterback with very limited wide receivers. And guess what happened? They were leading New England in the fourth quarter, and it looked like they were going to the Super Bowl. So there's a way you can do it. The way you do it, though, is with an identity. And I'm going to tell you how you get that identity. You have to have one great unit, the defensive line, right? You have to have a scheme that masks a unit that might not be as great, the defensive backs. Great defensive line, defensive backs. It works hand in hand. If one unit is great, then you won't even see how bad the other unit is or how average they are. We won't say bad, how average they are, right? There's one element that is always left out that is so important. That's the special teams. Let me tell you about a special teams coach. He might be the smartest coach on the team because his units, whether it's punt return, punt, kickoff, kick return, or field goal block, he's the one guy that knows absolutely everybody on that team because those units are mixed and matched based on the whole roster, not just offensive guys and not just defensive guys. It's everybody. Everybody plays on those units. He's one of the smartest people. He knows the entire roster. He knows what they're capable of. He knows their athletic profiles. He knows all of that. And I don't know if you noticed in the preseason, the Jaguars were one of the best teams, in my opinion, with this new kickoff rule. And then the way that they're constructed with very athletic players, big athletic players that run and that have length, I think they're going to do a good job of stopping that new kickoff rule. When you think of Tank Bigsby almost scoring a touchdown, you think of Parker Washington almost scoring a touchdown. You ain't even seen Devin Duvernay get busy on the kickoff return. If he gets loose, almost. So one of the things that actually came true, and I'll share this with you. I was on the sideline at practice, and I was talking to former head coach Dave Campo. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if these teams get away from the little guys in kick returns. A little wide receiver type, a little fast dude like Jamal Agnew. If you see Devin Duvernay, he's a wide receiver that's kind of built like a running back. He has a DJ Samuel type body, right? Debo Samuel type body. They have Tank Bigsby. Parker Washington might have the biggest legs pound for pound on the team. I'm just saying he's got tree trunk legs. So they're using the short, compact, break tackles, running traffic type player as opposed to the angular. Like you might not see a Cordero Patterson type guy returning kicks with these new rules, and he was very good at it. You might not see a Devin Hester type dude. You might see it on some teams, but you ain't gonna see it in Jacksonville. They're using dudes that are stout, tough, physical guys with good short area quickness. I think they're going to dominate. I believe they're going to give good field position, and I think they're going to be on the other side of it and not give up a whole bunch of field position. I think the punter, Logan Cook, is top 5 in the league, especially at placing the ball with the way he kicks it. He almost never gets a whole bunch of touchbacks. If there's a guy that can pin a team inside their own 10-yard line, it is Logan Cook. Now, tie that in with that defensive line. Field position, defensive line, right? Good field position on the other side when you're concerned about the offensive line, but you still got good skill players. You're going to be closer to scoring range. The field is going to constantly be flipped. And I ain't mentioned little Cam Little. I wonder if the dude's ever going to be mad at me about me calling him little Cam Little. But I'm telling you, this kid, they're not going to be afraid to try 59, 60 yarders if the weather's correct. That will give them another advantage. Okay? Combine that with the fact that they have more people who can make big plays. And if you get a team desperate enough and do a little max protecting, and the line, like I said, isn't going to be terrible, but if it's adequate enough just to hold on a little bit longer, they're going to be able to connect a lot of those plays. I think the Jaguars are going to be explosive, even if they're not all the time, if they're not efficient. They're going to get big plays from the receivers. They're going to get big plays in the special teams game. I think they're going to be really good with field goals. They're going to punt real well, and the defensive line is going to snatch the line of scrimmage from most teams that they play. That means they can win pretty and they can win ugly. Don't be surprised if the Jacksonville Jaguars, whether they win or lose, are extremely competitive in every single game because of their identity that they will have this year based on what we just said. Now, I know y'all going to hold my hand to the fire to make sure I'm right about this, and that's fine. We won't find out until the end of the year, but as it starts to play out, I want y'all to think back to the day or the night that I made this podcast. I thought about it all day, right? And see if your boy is right. Making us your first listen is cool. Now, I know you've heard of the NFL division preview for the AFC South, but to become the most informed NFL fan, make sure you check out the entire 2024 Locked On NFL season preview covering every division across the league. From all of our 32 hosts who cover the team each day, including me, this 8-episode series will stream live on the 24/7 Locked On NFL YouTube channel and Amazon Fire TV app. Catch all the action on Tuesday, September 3rd, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The 2024 Locked On NFL season preview is the kind of analysis, insight, and entertainment you won't find anywhere else. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I will do a show Monday on Labor Day. You guys make sure you have a wonderful weekend with your family and your loved ones, and tune in to Locked On Jaguars on Labor Day, where we talk about the identity of this football team. We're going to carry it even further to make sure that we cover all the bases. Bases are covered today. It's time for me to go. You guys take care. We'll see you next time.